Good morning.
Morning. Oh, sorry.
Good morning. No, Shanali, could you go ahead there? Yeah, we're just leaving it. I'm just going to say, we're just waiting for a few participants to join there, Shanali, and we'll kick off. We'll just give it a minute just before we kick off. I was just going to do a short welcome on behalf of the Chamber to the TSS team again, who are here and being great support to the Chamber. We were just saying, this is probably our third or fourth session with TSS, and members really appreciate the support that you've been given to our members, because it has been a challenging time, I think, in trying to understand all the various nuances of the paperwork, etc. And I think you've been a great help as a team. So I know Shankar can't join us this morning, but I'd like also to pass his our thanks on to him as well for his support. So just before we kick off, yeah, if we're okay, I think we'll kick off there. I mean, the webinar for Chamber members aims to provide a full update on the free-to-use trader support service, and it provides guidance and helps businesses and traders of all sizes to navigate the changes to the way goods move once the Northern Ireland Protocol came into effect in January 2021. Of course, that's a big discussion. We won't go there on that one this morning, but certainly it's an ongoing discussion, maybe longer than we thought it would go on, and it has brought its own challenges, but hopefully we're seeing light at the end of the tunnel. And you know, it's an ongoing situation, and we will keep our members abreast of any changes that come out of the discussions once they're all finalized. I guess Shanali is the message, really. So without further ado, I'd like to thank Shanali, Magda, Doreen for joining us this morning, and maybe hand over to you, Shanali, to take us through the presentation. I know it's an open forum, loads of questions and answers, please, but I'll let you cover off that, Shanali, if that's okay.
Great, thank you, Paul. So hi, everyone. As Paul mentioned, I'm Shanali Dashani. I work in Fujitsu as part of the stakeholder engagement team with Magda and Doreen, who work across the TSS consortium. And our aim is really to ensure that the TSS is delivered successfully. And as we said, as hopefully most of you have noticed, the functionality is constantly being delivered. There are constantly service enhancements, and especially sort of in the second half of this year, we've really focused on the more kind of complex journey. So more around rest of world goods being either shipped or flown into any of the Northern Irish ports, anything being moved under a custom special procedure. And that's been a lot of the focus lately. And now, as Paul said, everything's a bit up in the air with the negotiations. So we felt like this was a good time to touch base, check everyone was comfortable with what has happened so far, what is actually available now, because as we said, there's kind of been a lot of releases that we've kind of been speaking about at the same time. So just to double check you haven't missed anything that could be really useful to you, and then kind of having a forward look at what is coming. And as Paul said, we will definitely reconnect in the new year once we kind of understand what was happening with the negotiations and what that means for TSS and your business processes. So I will just present some slides. Hopefully you can see these okay in a second. Great. So as I said, this is pretty much what we're going to run through today. We will ensure that all the slides are shared with you, so don't worry about taking notes. And as you can see, the Chamber is recording the session as well. So if you wanted to revisit any of it, please do. As I said, I've got my colleagues Magda and Doreen on. They are part of the specialist sort of support that TSS provides in terms of kind of that expert hands-on support. So if there are any questions that you have during the session, please just pop them into the chat function, and Magda and Doreen will try to answer them. And if there are any that are particularly complex or we think that might be better answered live, we'll do it at the end of the session. So as ever, it's always just kind of useful to start with what the TSS is. Apologies if this is very familiar to a lot of you. It's just kind of always useful to kind of go back to the basics. So as Paul mentioned at the beginning, the TSS is completely free to use. We are a digital service, and we've really tried hard to kind of focus on that digital end of it and move away kind of from the legacy of paper systems. As we know, the Northern Ireland situation is quite unique in the fact that while the rest of the goods moving between Great Britain and mainland EU are still within their own phased control, Northern Ireland Protocol kicked in on the 1st of January this year, which meant that we had 3 months to essentially deliver the service and ensure that we were there to provide a way of declaring goods moving from Great Britain into Northern Ireland on the 1st of January. And TSS put a lot of focus on how can we ensure that goods moved by introducing a lot of simplified processes. So to that end, one of our core focuses is to ensure that all traders, large or small, feel supported in what has changed, why has it changed, what does this actually mean for my business? What data do I now need to gather? and what do I actually need to do to make sure my goods get through that end-to-end journey, through the ports, etc. So hopefully most of you are familiar with it, but we have set up an education site called NICTA, or the Northern Ireland Customs and Trade Academy.co.uk. You'll see lots and lots of links to various bits of guidance in this presentation. So please do visit if you haven't already. NICTA is completely publicly available. You don't need a TSS account to go and access any of it. We have all sorts of material. So you have what we call the user guides, which are quite comprehensive step-by-step guides telling you how to do a certain type of declaration or a certain type of process. We then have much more in detail data guides, which take you through every data element. If you're looking for someone to provide you kind of more videos and looking for a more visual way of doing it, there are lots of really short videos showing you what the system actually looks like and having an agent guide you through the process. And then all the way through to sessions similar like this one, where they're like 30 minutes, an hour, 2-hour webinars on some of the really, really detailed topics where it's worth kind of stepping through it all in a really, really comprehensive way. So if you haven't visited NICTA, please do. And of course, the entire point of the TSS is to provide a digital way to support traders to make declarations for all goods moving from Great Britain into Northern Ireland following the Northern Ireland Protocol. So as I said, it is fully digital. Everything is done via our portal at the trader support service.co.uk. Hopefully you are all really familiar with it. You can not only submit declarations, you can hold them in draft, keep changing them into draft status. You can view any of your previous declarations. And of course, this goes across the whole supply chain. So both your hauliers, your traders, etc. You can all see what's going on. And as we'll come across later, there is a few different models for you to be able to block different types of private data. And now, if you do use an agent and intermediary, you can also authorize them to make declarations on your behalf instead of having to give them your login details. So all of, as we said, all of that is done digitally. We've had no outages. The service is available 24/7. So if you need to make declarations outside of business hours, the system is there for you. And then behind all of this, if at any point you need a slightly more human level of support, you want to talk to someone, you can always contact the contact center. And you can do this either by raising a case online and someone will get back to you, or you can ring into the contact center where some of our tiered staff will be able to pick up your query. So if you're generally calling, you will reach a tier 1 who will be able to either point you towards the right guidance or escalate you up to a tier 2. Tier 2 agents have a couple of years of customs experience and they can start looking at the granularity of your query. Is it something we can help with? Do you need to be pointed to some guidance? Do you need to be allocated to a certain specialist team? And then if at any point it's a slightly more complex query, it needs a specialist agent to run through exactly what's gone wrong with the declaration, go through the data elements, understand what it is that might be causing your CDS error message. That's when we push you up to a tier 3. And this is a community of like 50 or 60 agents who have decades of industry experience. They've worked as in-house consultants, and they're really, really there to provide that kind of expert hands-on approach. So that's pretty much what the TSS does do. It's always worth kind of just paying a few minutes on what the TSS cannot do. As I said, because we are completely free to use, we're contracted by HMRC to help all UK businesses. Is it going to pop up again? Nope. Oh God. Okay. Okay, sorry about that. If at any point, as we said, we do serve the entire market for free. The TSS isn't mandatory, but we do serve something like 45,000 registered traders, which is really, really fantastic because you can see the market engaging with the TSS, but it does mean we can't really provide that more personalized bespoke approach a normal customs broker would do. So we do always say, if at any point you are looking for a support that goes above and beyond what the TSS already provides, you want someone to come in, tell you exactly how you can help operationalize your business, how you can be more effective in terms of trade processes. Should you set up a customs warehouse? How can you become more economically viable within your trade routes? Maybe you should look towards reaching out to the current intermediary market, as that's exactly what they're there for. And it's a really important note because, as you can see on the bottom left of the screen, eventually TSS will exit the market. And at that point, we really want to make sure that there's a really strong network of trade and customs support all across the UK, ready to kind of take on that administrative burden. And then final note is, if you move goods kind of outside of the typical customs remit, like you move live animals, food products, excise goods, etc., there may be additional things you need to do, like export health certificates, excise permits, etc. So we cannot raise them for you, but we can tell you exactly why you need them. where you obtain them, and where they fit into your TSS journey. So I won't spend too long here. These are just sort of some happy stats to kind of give you a view of how the service has actually been progressing. We're really, really proud to say that we've now supported almost 4 million declarations. As you can see, that's over 1 million consignments have now moved to date, which, considering in the climate of COVID and trade has been a bit sort of skewed, it's been really, really great to see the numbers have been slowly steadying. And it's been really, really great to see people kind of engaging with that backlog of supplementary declarations. And you can see the numbers are heavily dropping. So it's worth now just kind of diving into what does the process actually look like. Again, hopefully most of you will be familiar with these terms. We normally talk about 3 types of declarations. The first one is your entry summary, or your E&S safety and security declaration. This is essentially exactly what it says. It's a security declaration that you make whenever entering the EU security zone, which Northern Ireland forms part of. As we'll see in a second, this is typically done by your haulier because it includes detail on the vehicle. So it makes sense for it kind of to sit with the haulier, but it does normally involve you giving them a basic description of the goods, the EORI numbers, or those business identification numbers of the buyer and the supplier, and then the haulier will complete the vehicle information as well. But of course, at any point, if you as the trader wanted to log on and add your consignment data, you can do that under what's known as consignment first. So once the E&S is then done, you have your customs import declaration. This is really important because in the early days, as I said, TSS chose to absolutely prioritize the flow of goods. So what we did is we split the import declaration in 2 halves following a simplified process. And so the first half is known as a simplified frontier declaration, or an SFD. It does pretty much what it says on the tin. It's a simplified data set. And to make it even easier, TSS decided, actually, can we automate this on behalf of the trader? So when your haulier completes the E&S safety and security declaration, we then take the exact same data set and we automatically complete the simplified frontier declaration on your behalf. At that point, the goods can now move. And then finally, you'll need to log back on. If you are the importer of record, if you're the trader receiving the goods, likely, you'll need to log on and complete the supplementary declaration, which is the more meaty kind of part of the process. You know, what are your commodity codes? What's the origin of your goods? Are you claiming preference? And finally, do you need to pay a duty? So that's what the process was for a really long time. We now offer the opportunity for you to also complete a full frontier declaration, which basically is you do the full import declaration before the goods move. It really just depends on what's better for your business. We generally say if you've been using the simplified process and it's working, stick to the simplified process because it gives you a bit more time to make sure you've got the correct data and play around with the system when you submit your supplementary declaration. Whereas with the full frontier, you will need to do the full declaration up front. You need to be fully submitted and all duties need to be paid if applicable. But saying that, for certain businesses, if you've already got the data, you're already providing it to an agent, it might be easier just to do it. So it's all completely done before the goods move. So it's really a business decision. Some of you will have noticed if you do move goods that come rest of the world into Northern Ireland, so not from the EU, not from the UK, you know, you might be shipping goods from China, flying goods in from the US, you will have to complete a full frontier declaration in order to use the TSS. And similarly, if you move goods under a customs special procedure, you will also be pushed down the FFD route. So just something to note. So here's a slightly more visual version of what we were talking about. We normally say step 1 is double check what your shipping arrangements are, especially something known as Incoterms. This is really important because it will change who needs to do what on the TSS model. So normally we put the burden on the NI buyer, the person receiving the goods will be the one who's being listed as the importer of record on the TSS. That means they're the one who will need to raise the import declaration. They will be the one who need to pay any duties. If, however, you move goods under an Incoterm known as delivered duty paid, it literally means that the goods have already been paid for, meaning your GB supplier has agreed as part of your business arrangement that they will be the importer of record, they will pay any of the duties. So really, really helpful to note because you might not actually be liable for anything. So once you figured out who it is that does what, as I said, typically your haulier will then log on to complete the entry summary or the safety security declaration. If, however, you as a trader would like to log on, add in the goods information first, you can do that. Then you just provide the detail of the header to your haulier, they log back on, bring the header back up and they add the vehicle information. So again, flexibility depending on what works for your business. Once the E&S is then submitted, TSS will send that to the relevant government system known as ICS Northern Ireland. And we then use the exact same data set to automatically complete the simplified frontier declaration on your behalf. So that's the first half of the customs declaration, and we send that to CDS which is the customs system operating in Northern Ireland. If at that point both government systems approve each of the declarations, we get back clearances known as movement reference numbers, or MRNs, and we'll pass them back to you via the portal. Again, I'll apologise now for the amount of acronyms we're going to have. It's why sometimes it's best to just kind of go all the way back to the basics before we start talking in lots and lots of acronyms. So at that point, you now have 2 MRNs, a clearance for your safety security declaration, and a clearance for your first half of your customs declaration. At that point, your haulier will then need to log on to another system known as GVMS, or the Goods Vehicle Movement System. This is a HMRC system that essentially will track the movement across the Irish Sea. And it's quite good to get familiar with the process now, because as you'll see in the next year or so, GVMS will start operating for all UK ports, especially for those moving goods into mainland EU. So basically, in order to get used to GVMS, your haulier will log on, provide their registration details, and enter any MRN that's being associated with the vehicle. It could be multiple. And at that point, GVMS will validate that the compliance has been completed. And if it's happy, it will give you a barcode, and it will only be one barcode per vehicle, known as a goods movement reference, or a GMR. That's a really, really important step. And all of this has to be done before the journey even begins, because when your haulier arrives at whichever the GB port of destination is, for example, if we're talking about Liverpool to Belfast, when they get to Liverpool, the ferry operator will ask to see the GMR, and the ferry operator will scan it and validate it in order to allow you to board the ferry. So once that's on, you're on the ferry, it's the scanning of that barcode that tells TSS, this is now a live journey, your goods are moving, and we will send you a notification, you being whoever is listed as the importer of record. So it's really important to make sure that the haulier inputs the right EORI number over here at this step in the ENS. So TSS will contact whoever the importer of record is, whether it's the GB supplier or the NI buyer, and ask you to log back on to the TSS portal, and you have until the 4th working day of the following month to finish the supplementary declaration and pay any outstanding duties if applicable. So that's kind of a bit of a whistle-stop tour of the process. If you did want to do a full frontier declaration, as you can see here, the process is very similar. The only difference would be is when your haulier logs on, they will select the ENS only option, which means that TSS won't trigger through the rest of the declarations. So once they've done that, you as the trader will then log on, you will complete the full frontier declaration, you will pay any duties, and then the rest of the process is the same. We receive the MRNs or the clearances, your haulier will log on to GVMS, your journey is complete, but now you don't have to do anything once your goods are delivered. So I will just pause there and double check if we have any questions, but I think we're okay. Great. So this is just a bit of a reminder of if you do move any goods that sit under the term controlled, please make sure you actually know what this means. In the early days, this caused a bit of confusion because typically people think controlled goods means customs controlled goods. So am I moving excise goods like alcohol or tobacco or firearms? But what we actually use it in the TSS to mean is any good that falls under any control by any government department. So for example, if you are moving what's known as SPS goods, so sanitary and phytosanitary, it's basically the umbrella term that's used for anything that's regulated by DEFRA or DERA. So it includes live animals, food products, meat products, dairy products, plants, plant products, and ozone depleting gases. So if you do happen to move any of those, and you haven't been doing any of the extra steps which we'll come on to, please familiarize yourself with it now, because it's a really, really important step to ensure that you're being compliant. And a final note here on controlled also includes any goods that are moving under a customs special procedure, because again, it's an additional control. So we wanted to particularly focus here on those SPS goods, so any live animals, animal or plant products. Make sure that you do know there are additional things that you need to do. As you can see on the screen, you will need to raise, you'll need to be registered on Traces, which is an EU system, and you'll need to raise what's known as a CHED form, and you'll need to update it with an export health certificate. Apologies if this isn't relevant to anyone on the call, but if you are moving these goods and you have never heard of these terms, this is really the time to get familiar, because it's probably safe to say in the coming months, the systems will get a lot tighter, compliance will be pushed a lot harder. So if you have kind of assumed, well, it's been working for me now, it won't always be that way. So please double check you are being fully compliant if you are moving SPS goods. So I won't try and scare you with this slide. All this is trying to tell you is the steps here at the bottom are what you need to do before you even begin your customs declaration. So the NI buyer, or the person that's the importer of record in Northern Ireland, they will need to log on to Traces and complete what's known as a CHED. At that point, you then need to contact your GB supplier. For some, this may be a closed circuit, but essentially it's saying that you need to arrange for an official vet to come and inspect your goods, whether it's a live animal or a meat product, and they will sign, seal, and certify that these goods, these animals are healthy, and they will give you what's known as an export health certificate. You then need to go and update Traces and update your CHED form with the details of that export health certificate. And at that point, your movement is now ready to go, but you still need to do the customs end of it. And that's really important because, as you'll see here, once you've done all of these steps, in order to complete your TSS declaration at that ENS SFD level, the very first step, we will ask you for your CHED reference, and we will ask you if there's any other things you need to upload, including an export health certificate. So it's really, really important, as I said, check, are you registered on Traces? Are you comfortable with raising a CHED form? Do you know what these terms mean? Do you have a vet on call that can come and certify that your goods are healthy, whether it's an export health or a phytosanitary for plants? And you'll need to do, as I said, all of that before you even get to your TSS declaration. And if you're unsure of, maybe I do move one of these goods, but I'm not sure what the documents I need are, you can visit the gov.uk tool known as the Northern Ireland Online Tariff Tool, and you can essentially type in your good, find and identify the correct commodity code, and at that point, the tool will tell you, okay, so for example, in this scenario, the good will have a document code which says that you need a common health entry document, which is a CHED, a CHED-P, meaning it's probably something to do with plants. That's the document code. That's what you need to do. And this is where you'll put it on your TSS declaration. So we're going through this quickly, but if you want to know any more about this, please visit either of these videos or all the how-to guides, which will take you through this step by step. And as I said, here's another video. So hopefully this is kind of where we're getting to, with which is probably of the most interest to colleagues on the call, is supplementary declarations. So as I said, once you've gone through all of the steps, your goods have now been delivered. At this point, TSS will contact you to say, we need you to provide the additional shipment information. And as I said, this is really all the detail to do with your actual good. And that's when it's all being done generally after the goods move, so you have a bit of time to gather the data. It is worth noting you do have to do the supplementary declaration. It is absolutely a legal requirement, and your import is not complete without it. So please do make sure that you are engaging with the system. If you're having any difficulties, just reach out and we can have an agent help you and take you in a more step-by-step sort of route. The TSS is here to support, so please do make use of us. And finally, if you have found that an incorrect EORI number has been used, or perhaps somebody is using your EORI number incorrectly, mixing up the digits, etc., and suddenly TSS is asking you to fill in supplementary declarations for goods that you definitely didn't move, please just raise a case, and we will make sure an agent is manually able to take those out of your account and reallocate them to the right trader account. And this is just a reminder of what the timeline looks like. Bear with me 1 second. So as you can see here, here's when your goods are being entered onto the TSS. All of this is done before the goods move. Delivery happens. TSS will contact you to complete the supplementary declaration, and you have until the 4th working day of the following month. Oh, apologies.
Sinead, did you want me to try and display on mine?
Oh, it's okay. I think it's I think it's on now, but thank you, Magda. I don't want to bug you to have to keep hopefully you can see this in a second. Oh, it's just a bug that I'm trying to get IT to fix. It's always good when we have a bit of technical difficulty on these calls. Apologies, everyone. Okay, hopefully you can see this fine. So some of you will have heard what we refer to as the supplementary declaration backlog. And this was essentially, as I said, As some of you will have known, the TSS is basically set up and then delivered in 3 months, which meant we hadn't had to prioritize which functionality we'd go live with. So obviously it made sense to start with the ENS SFD, so the security declaration, and the first half of the customs declaration. And then 3 months later, we released functionality to start completing supplementary declarations. But that meant that for all goods that moved in January and February, as soon as the 1st of March hit, suddenly there was already a backlog of declarations. And that's obviously continued throughout the summer as traders have kind of moved through the backlog. And as I'm sure lots of you will have noticed, if you were waiting for TSS functionality, for example, like custom special procedures, or like some of the things that kind of came out across the summer, you will also have a backlog of stuff that was waiting to be completed in that way. So we just want to reassure you, we are absolutely aware that if you haven't been able to complete a declaration because TSS functionality wasn't available, we are not going to come bugging you to ask you why you haven't completed this yet. We are, as I said, people have been engaging really well and the numbers are reducing. But if for any reason you have been trying and things just aren't going well, either because the declarations are just too tricky or you're getting error messages all the time, please raise a case, please get in touch with us and we can try to help move these declarations for you. And it is worth noting, if you haven't engaged the process at all, you will be flagged as non-compliant. So you really do need to make sure you have at least tried to engage with the process. And hopefully you, as most of you will have seen now, it's a matter of, get it right once and hopefully you can keep replicating. We know it's a pain to get all the data and kind of get into the flow of doing something new. But now, hopefully after, a couple months of the TSS now being live, it's almost a year, hopefully things are kind of becoming a lot smoother and you're comfortable with what you need to do to get your declarations through. So this was just a slide to say, don't worry, we know that there are still things being released. So if that's what you're waiting for, we won't be coming looking to ask you why you haven't completed. So finally, this is kind of what we refer to as your strategy. Do you actually know when you're logging on to complete your supplementary declaration, what your options are? What is the best way for your business to declare goods in order to reduce the tariff? And if you're wanting to know more about any of these, or you're not really sure actually what is best for your business, you can visit that gov.uk decision engine, which is on the slide there, and it will ask you a series of questions and provide hopefully a helpful recommendation. So generally we organize this into 4 checks. Step 1, are the goods that you're moving, do they already have a 0 tariff? And this could be, there are certain goods that are seen as being like of mutual benefit. So for example, if you're a utilities provider, electricity comes with no tariff. So it's that idea of, it's beneficial to not have a duty associated, so electricity can flow. So it's worth double checking, does my good already have a 0 tariff? Because if it does, when you log on to do your supplementary declaration and you put in the commodity code, TSS and CDS will calculate that commodity, that type of good already has a 0 tariff, so there's no duty applicable when you press submit. So that is step 1. Do my goods have a 0 tariff are they 0 rated on the EU Common External Tariff? Step 2, if your goods aren't 0, which most of them will have a tariff against, what you then want to check is, can I be on the UK trader scheme? Can I be authorised by HMRC to declare my goods not at risk of entering the EU? So what this essentially means is there a way for me to prove that as a UK business, I move UK goods that stay within the UK customs territory, and therefore they are never liable to pay an EU import duty? So what this is essentially asking you is, for example, if I'm a clothes retailer, I ship my goods worldwide into my GB depot, then they're sat there and I sell to stores all over the UK and Ireland. So if I can prove by my stock transfers, my company invoices, etc., that I use one haulier to deliver my goods to Northern Ireland and I use another haulier to deliver my goods to Dublin, and I have stores all across both of these, but if I can show and go through the various criteria, which we'll come on to in a second, if I can prove to HMRC that actually, even though some of my goods go into the Republic of Ireland, and on those goods I will pay an EU import duty, the rest of them, actually, they move into Northern Ireland, I can show you which goods they are, I can show you where they stayed, and they are for sale in Northern Ireland, they're for final use for consumers in Northern Ireland, therefore I never need to pay an EU import duty. That's essentially what the UK Trader Scheme does, and it's really important that if you haven't already tried to see if you're authorised and you're not already on the scheme, please do check now to see if you can be, because as I said, there are massive benefits in part of being the scheme, and it's the only way you can declare your goods not at risk. And we obviously don't know the way negotiations are going to go, but I think it's fair to say that this category of not at risk is going to become more important. So please double check if you can be on the scheme and get registered now. If for whatever reason you cannot be on the scheme, and as I said, we'll go through the criteria in a second, but there are certain, for example, processing exemptions. So if you're a really, really big processor or a manufacturer, you might not be able to be on the UK Trader Scheme because your goods are defaulted as being at risk, even though they might stay in Northern Ireland, meaning that you may have to pay a duty. You can then look at, actually, is there another way I can reduce my tariff? Can I claim preference? And the only way to do that is look at the preferential rules of origin. I won't spend very long on this point because it is quite complex, and it essentially says, can I claim that my good is either from a country that reduces the tariff, or it's changed its status because I've processed it in some way, and for example, it's now a UK product, etc. We have run a really detailed webinar exactly on this point if you would like to know more about it. So please just go onto the NICTA site and go onto the webinar section, and you'll see one all about rules of origin. But essentially, if 1, 2, and 3 don't apply, so my goods aren't 0 rated, so there is a tariff that actually maybe I can be on the UK Trader Scheme. If not, can I claim preference? And if none of those apply, your goods are going to be defaulted as being stated as at risk of entering the EU. They will be liable for an EU import duty, but you may be able to claim the waiver. And this is essentially a waiver form that you fill in with HMRC that says, I either move goods at such a low volume or at such a low frequency that I don't really need to fuss around with steps 1, 2, or 3, and I can just fill in the waiver, which is essentially a state aid that says between the EU and the UK that says, actually, for this level of goods, it's not worth traders kind of having to do all of the admin because it's not actually posing a massive risk of smuggling into the EU, etc. So it does have a threshold. So if you move goods worth up to 200,000 over 3 fiscal years, you can use the waiver to mitigate any of the tariff that you'll need to pay there. But it is worth noting, it is really only suitable for that kind of smaller trader, or if you don't move goods very often, because large traders will exhaust that 200,000 euro limit very quickly. But those are essentially your 4 checks. And unfortunately, if none of those fit, your goods are at risk, you are going to have to pay an EU import duty unless you use a custom special procedure or relief to suspend the duty, for example, check them into a warehouse or move them under a different type of procedure. So just to highlight what you actually need to do to be on the UK Trader Scheme, there are certain criteria that you need to fulfill. As you can see, the main one is, can I prove that my goods stay in Northern Ireland, are for final use by consumers in Northern Ireland, or are sold to other companies within Northern Ireland, and therefore are only moving within the UK. And that's really, really, really important because the evidence is really what's going to help you. Oh, and you can see a link, apologies, there at the bottom if you would like to know more. So what's the criteria? What do I actually need to be able to do in order to be eligible? So this is a point that actually confused quite a lot of people in the early days. So if you are someone who excluded yourself because you don't have a fixed place of business in Northern Ireland, say, for example, you're a GB business who supplied on those DDP terms, so you're not based in Northern Ireland, but you serve the Northern Ireland market, it would confuse a lot of people that was a hard limit. HMRC have now agreed that actually there is no requirement for that anymore. The easement is permanent. So as long as you can prove that you are either in Northern Ireland business, you're established in Northern Ireland, you have an office, etc., or you use the TSS to indirectly represent yourself and you're based in GB, you can absolutely be on the UK Trader Scheme. So please, if this is sparking any bells of why you didn't apply in the early days, please get registered now. So once you've established that, basically it's saying, am I a UK business? Am I established in the UK? Great. Obviously, you won't be able to be on the UK Trader Scheme if you've previously had a tax infringement or some kind of other criminal offence with any government department. So you must have a good record. You need to make sure you have great record keeping. As I said, there's quite a huge list of things you could provide here, all the way through from like stock transfers, intercompany invoices, through to a whole range of commercial documents. But as long as you can prove to a strong degree these goods moved and this is where they stayed, that will satisfy the HMRC criteria here. And finally, there may be additional requirements for processing, which we'll come on to, I think, on the next 2 slides. So finally, if you can get on it, how do you actually prove that your goods are not at risk? So step one, you need to be authorized. Once you've applied to HMRC, the process can take a few weeks for you to get authorized. So that's why we're trying to say, get on it now if you haven't already, especially as we come up to the busy Christmas period. When you're then filling in your TSS supplementary declaration, in order for TSS to know that your goods are not at risk, you will use the code NIREM, literally stands for remaining in Northern Ireland, on your TSS declaration, and that tells TSS to calculate the risk down because you won't be eligible for any EU import duty. And then finally, you need to maintain the evidence because HMRC can audit you at any point, can come to your business premises and ask you to prove 5 years worth of records to show this. So it's really important that you know you're either showing that your goods moved to a, for example, Northern Ireland store where they were for sale to customers in Northern Ireland, or they were for business use for in Northern Ireland also. And if you can't provide evidence for that, then you cannot be using the NIREM code, you cannot be declaring goods not at risk, and you may be liable for retrospective duties. And finally, it's just, as I said, double checking. Unfortunately, there is kind of a processing exemption here. And unfortunately, this is just to do with the EU-UK agreement around manufacturing to make sure it kind of stayed in line with the EU principles. So if you are a small processor and therefore your turnover is below £500,000, you'll be fine to be on the UK trader scheme. Or if you're an approved processor, e.g. selling food to consumers in the UK, certain construction goods, healthcare goods, things that are seen of like national benefit, etc., you double check whether you can fall within that category. But unfortunately, if you are a kind of a typical commercial manufacturer, it's likely that you will be exempted from this and you won't be able to be declare your goods not at risk because they're defaulted as at risk. Same for anyone who moves steel. There are certain trade remedies at play here. So finally, another really useful tool is once you're on the UK trader scheme, if you start realizing actually my goods move maybe like 30, 70, some stay in Northern Ireland, there's a split that go to Republic. It doesn't matter if you're not 100% sure which way it goes, as long as you can show to a reasonable degree which way it goes, and you can show that your history of trade, even though it fluctuates a bit, on an average of 6 months, it was a 70-30 split, that's fine, and that's known as apportionment, which means you can still claim your goods as not at risk. But you have to be on the UK trader scheme to use this tool. So as you can see, lots and lots of benefits on getting on the scheme if you haven't already, and you just need to notify HMRC that you intend to use it. And you can prove this because you have a really stable supply chain. As you can see there, a 10% margin of error. So it doesn't matter if you fluctuate a bit, as long as the solid line is a split that you can show and provide evidence to support. And then finally, as I said earlier, if that UK trader scheme doesn't apply to you, but you're still quite a small business, or you don't move goods at a high volume into Northern Ireland, double check if the waiver can apply to you, because it may be really beneficial if you don't really want to have to go through all of the admin. And realistically, the 200,000 limit is great for you. Let's waive all of that EU import duty. And as you can see there, there's the links on how you can claim it and how you can fill in the form online. And finally, another probably arguably one of the biggest benefits of being on the UK trader scheme or claiming the waiver means you can use what's known as the bulking stencil or the supplementary declaration assistant. This is a really, really useful tool that TSS and HMRC set up in the early days, which said, actually, because your goods are not at risk, and I know we throw this term around a lot, but if you take a step back and think what I mean, you are saying that you are a UK business that moves UK goods that stay in the UK and is therefore never going to incur an EU import duty. So actually, you already don't need to pay a tariff. You do need to fill in a customs declaration because of the nature of the Northern Ireland Protocol, but how can we make this easier for you? So what we did is we set up a tool that says you can bulk to the highest commodity code. So for example, if you move all types of clothes in a lorry that has a whole range of garments on it, you can actually just bulk to the highest commodity code, which is a various textiles code. But because you're using the code NIREM, because you're using the code NIAID, which shows whether you're doing the waiver or you're declaring that your goods are not at risk under the UK trader scheme, either of those then mean that even though you've selected the bulking tool, your tariff is still a 0. And then what it does is it provides you a template of exactly what you need to fill in on your supplementary declaration. So you can imagine, for those of you who have tried and have really struggled with the supplementary declaration, here is now a literal step-by-step template, which you can then just copy and paste onto the system. but you have to be on the UKTS or have to be claiming a waiver to use it. So again, if any of this is ringing happy bells, please go visit the link, reach out to one of us if you want to double check if you can use it. But essentially, if you are authorised in the UK Trader Scheme or you're claiming a waiver, this is an ideal tool for you. And here are some links of how you can double check it. And here's some useful decision engines. I won't go through them in too much detail, but essentially it's a similar flow of what is it I need to get down to. So if, for example, let's use the example of I am a Northern Ireland business, I'm established. Let's use the example of a clothing retailer. And let's say I'm not on the UK Trader Scheme for whatever reason. Am I using a procedure that's not currently supported? No, that's fine. For example, I'm not moving goods under a special procedure. You can then move through to, is your duty rate full or is it zero, etc. As you can see there, what it's trying to ask you is, are you at a zero duty anyway? Because you may be able to use the supplementary declaration assistant. So it's taking you to these helpful steps here. And this is really good because this is a reminder of if you move goods under certain, as we said, special procedures, if they're not supported, don't worry, just wait until the declaration comes out. Tick the box that says you're waiting for functionality and nobody will bug you to finish that until the functionality is released. As you said, if you come down here, so my goods don't have a trade remedy. So for example, the steel stuff, unfortunately, my goods do have a tariff on them. I'm not. So if you then answered yes on the UK Trader Scheme, points you straight to the SDA, which, as I said, just provides you a template. Am I not registered on the UK Trader Scheme? It will take me through to the next slide. So in our situation, actually, maybe I could use NI aid. And then it's another helpful reminder telling you, are you sure you don't want to be on the UK Trader Scheme? And then it still points you to the supplementary declaration assistant. Or what it then asks you is a really helpful question of, are you sure that there isn't a way for you to reduce your tariff? If you can't, your goods aren't zero rated, you're not on the UK Trader Scheme, you don't want to use NI aid, can you do something else to reduce your duty liability, such as a special procedure? And then it takes you all the way through to the steps. And here's the decision engine up top as well. So as you can see here, this is just some helpful points. So here's our data guide. As I said, if you really would like to know more, there's huge amounts of guidance for you to refer to. And this is just a reminder of, do you make sure that you're using the right codes? As I said, NIREM is the only way we'll know that your goods are not at risk, and NI aid is the only way that we know you're claiming the waiver. And here we go again. Here's the reminder of them, but this is just us trying to show you, if 1, 2, 3, 4 do not work, have you thought about a custom special procedure or relief? And this could be in the form of any of these processes. So as we say on the left here, if your goods are at risk of entering the EU, they're classed as at risk, which means you might be liable for paying what could be a high EU import duty. Did you know you might be able to get relief from any of these customs or excise duties and or import VAT by using a customs procedure? So what we've got on the list here isn't exhaustive, but these are the main ones that TSS have prioritised. So first one, customs warehousing. Have you thought about opening a customs warehouse, which means you just have to get set up to be a warehouse keeper with HMRC? It does involve a bit of a process, but if you move a lot of stock, this could be really useful for you. There's also warehouses you may be able to check your goods into, so worth double checking if you're, for example, if you use a freight forwarder and agent, sometimes they have warehouses you could use. But essentially what this means is, let's use our example of the textiles retailer again. I've shipped goods from all over the world that come into my GB depot. I then check them straight into a warehouse in the UK until I decide where I need my stock. At that point, no duty has been paid. So when I move it into Northern Ireland, I only need to pay the duty once because it was already in what's known as duty suspension when it's inside that customs warehouse. So it could be really useful if you want to move goods around, especially as we know the way trade flows between the Republic of Ireland, Northern Ireland and Great Britain. You might want to keep moving stock. So if you have warehouses across them, you can keep moving them without ever incurring any duty until you check them out of the warehouse and they enter what's known as free circulation. So they're in the market now. You've also then got inward and outward processing. These are just opposites of each other, which essentially says, are goods coming into Northern Ireland for processing, outward processing, are they leaving for processing? And this is what I said in that example of manufacturing, where often these are used in conjunction. So maybe I ship parts from the rest of the world into Great Britain. I then hold them in a warehouse. I then ship some of the parts into Northern Ireland where they go into my processing plant. At that point, the goods have entered GB. I've held them in duty suspension in my customs warehouse. I then still don't want to pay any duty because it's parts, it's not a finished good. So I claim what's known as inward processing, which tells HMRC, I'm not going to pay any duty because my goods are still moving. They're not a finished good, they're being processed. They then enter Northern Ireland, they can be finished, processed, whatever. And at the point it enters the market again, you do another declaration that says, this is my finished good. I will now pay whichever the duty is required, whether it's Northern Ireland duty, UK duty, EU duty. And it's the same for outward processing. As I said, they're just splits of a second half. If you are interested in either of those, because they are quite detailed, we have a special procedure guide that goes through what you need to do to become authorised, what it looks like to declare on your declaration. And it's really important, if you are thinking about using these, there's quite a lot of record keeping you need to do to double check that it suits your business. One that we always really like to bring attention to is what's known as returned goods relief. This is a really, really, really useful relief because you don't need to be previously authorised as you do for all of the others. This essentially says, are my goods being returned? So for example, in my retailer example, if I'm a store who's constantly shipping goods between Great Britain and Northern Ireland because stock might be changing, as we saw with COVID, stores might have shut for months, so actually I want to bring all that stock back, but I've already paid duty on it once when it entered Northern Ireland. I not want to keep paying it if I'm going to bring it back to GB, bring it back to Northern Ireland. So what RGR says is, oh, okay, I've already moved these goods once. I've already paid duty once. Here's my proof of it. Here's my TSS declaration or my previous declaration or my commercial invoice that shows you I've done it once and I've paid it once. I don't need to pay it again. And you literally just need to add in a procedure code onto your declaration, which tells us this is a good that's being returned. There's no duty applicable. And this could also be really useful if you move goods from mainland EU. You then move them into Great Britain and you pay a UK import duty at that point. You then move the goods into Northern Ireland, where you might then be charged an EU import duty. But what you can say is, if you can prove that those goods came from the EU and had already been entered free circulation in Great Britain, so you've already paid the duty once, you don't need to pay it again. So again, really, really useful if that's how your business flows work. You have temporary admission, which essentially says my goods are temporarily entering Northern Ireland. This could be things like music festivals, gigs, trade exhibitions, arts exhibitions, medical relief, disaster relief, anything where it's I am moving business commercial goods, but I'm only moving them for a short period of time. So actually, do I need to do a full customs declaration, or is there something else I can do to mean I don't need to pay the full duty here? And then finally, authorised use says that for certain goods that are being put to a prescribed use, for example, it's often done in conjunction with inward processing. So am I processing goods that maybe are like military or civil aircraft? There's a certain level of relief that I'm exempted from. So apologies, it's a bit of a whistle stop tour through this just because we have done much more detailed presentations on it. But if you are interested in using any of those, you'll need to declare using a full frontier declaration, and you'll need to know what your procedure codes are. A procedure code is essentially a 4-digit code. For example, if you were moving goods into a warehouse, it would start with 71,000. And then you'll have an additional procedure code, which kind of helps you specify within that realm of moving goods into a warehouse, what is it specifically that I'm doing? And here's some guidance if you want to know more. And as you can see here, just kind of a helpful screenshot of this is what it will look like when you declare it. So essentially what they look like in Chief, which is the system that the kind of older custom system that's still operating in GB. Everything will be replaced by CDS soon, so it's worth getting comfortable with it now. As you can see here, here's your procedure code, here's your additional procedure code. If you want to know more about any of these and how you use them in combination, what does this 3-digit code mean with this one, you can double check what's known as the completion notes. You can find them in the appendices listed on here. As I said, this is probably not relevant to everyone, but it can be really useful if you're finding that you're paying way more duty than you are actually able to, or it's really kind of actively hurting your business cash flows. It's worth looking into, can you use this to help relief from either full duty or part of it. And as you can see here, this is what I was talking about, as it's helpful to know what they all start as, and it will always look like this. So anyone that starts 71 will always be related to a customs warehouse. For example, if you are moving goods under processing, it will always start with 51. So just kind of helpful bit of reference here. And finally, just worth noting again, if you are looking to use any of these, there are certain things you will need to set up, including a security deposit, for example, for things like inward processing, and you'll need to figure out how you do that via a HMRC, and you'll need to be authorized to do this. And if you do need to do it, you'll also be able to list it on your TSS customs declaration, where here it can ask you for your document code, and 955D is what relates to a security deposit. And again, we're going through this quite quickly, but if you want to know more, please double check the payments guide. And finally, I just want to bring your attention to ARGIA. As I said, it's the only special procedure or relief where you don't need to be authorized to do it. All you need to do is put on, have the right evidence and add that 51, the code that we'll come on to in a second to your declaration. So return goods relief is a relief that allows you to remove duty on goods that are being re-imported. So goods that have already moved across that boundary have already paid the duty associated with it. There are certain conditions, so they need to have already been in free circulation in the UK. You normally can only claim it for goods that moved within the last 3 years, and the relief is only claimed on the import part of it. So you wouldn't be able to claim it, for example, if you were exporting the goods to the EU. It's only when they're being received into the EU or Northern Ireland, etc., that you can say, I've already paid this once, I'm not paying it again. And finally, here's a few extra conditions that you can read in your own time. But here's kind of the more useful bit. So what are my use cases? As I said, probably the most common one will be, am I moving goods all of the time? Customer returns could be a really big one. As we know, like e-commerce is massive. So if you're moving goods into Northern Ireland, you pay the duty, then they're being returned back to you. Someone else has been buying them. You don't need to keep paying the duty on those as a business. As you can see, they're traders that transfer parts before the good is finished. And then finally, if you aren't eligible for the UK trader scheme, and you don't qualify for a preferential tariff, maybe you can then claim it if your goods started in the EU, you've paid them to be cleared into Great Britain, you've paid that UK import duty, you're now moving them into Northern Ireland, and you may be eligible to having to pay a EU import duty. You can say, no, it's already been done, it's an EU origin good, why do I need to pay it? And finally, as you can see here, the procedure codes related for returned goods relief begin with 61. So all you need to do is literally add that code on, and you'll need to prove that either your good began in the EU, as we said, and that will already paid the UK import duty, or that my good has been constantly returned, and here's my proofs of my commercial invoices. And HMRC have been quite good at showing quite a flexible list of things that could be used here. So again, if this is you think this could be helpful for you, please reach out to learn more. Please double check the guide, because we do think there's a lot of Northern Ireland businesses that are paying duty that probably they don't need to, because they could use returned goods relief. So please do look into it. So I'll take a breather from there. We are almost done. So this is just kind of looking at a forward look of what's actually happening. As I said, there's been some really, really key functionality that's been delivered across the summer. And these are mainly to do with what's known as inventory linked ports. So anything that's an ILP movement. So apologies for the acronyms on this slide, but what we're essentially saying is TSS now fully supports anything that is being shipped into Belfast Port or Londonderry, or being flown into Belfast City and Belfast International Airports. We can fully support those movements. And for example, it's a lot of agents that deal with a lot of those kind of rest of world goods. We can fully support agents and intermediaries on the TSS portal, which some of you may have noticed in the early days. If you were using an agent, you'd have had to have given them your login details so they could log on into the TSS portal as you and fill in your declaration. Now, your agent can have their own TSS account. You can authorize them following a few simple steps on the TSS portal, and they can then log on as themselves, enter your declaration and complete it that way without you having to give in all your login information. So slightly better on the data kind of protection front there. And finally, as we kind of move into Christmas, there will be a release in December, and there should be another release sort of Jan-Feb time. But this is all kind of very much around what will happen with the command paper, what's going to happen with the negotiations. So TSS is kind of looking at all the ways we can support any declarations that will come out of this. Hopefully, this could be a simplification for traders who can prove they are not at risk, but let's see what happens. And finally, as I said, if you want to know more on anything we've spoken about today, please either just reach out to us. You can either direct your queries through Paul and Anne, who can come back to us, or we can put you in touch with a tier 3 who can go through some of your queries in more detail if you'd rather do it kind of offline. And finally, please visit NICTA if you want to know more about anything we've spoken about today. As I said, you can look at a guide, you can watch a video, you can listen to a much more detailed webinar, whatever is your preference. So thank you very much for your time today, and we'll open up to a Q&A. So lots of, I can see lots of questions have come through. So I can see Magda has been replying. So we might as well just cover off some of them in case people haven't read what's in the chat. So does the €200,000 limit for the waiver include, is it only for duty or does it include other state aid? And the answer is it does cover all your state aid. And that's why we do say the limit, it doesn't seem as big as it is if you do move goods quite a lot, because if you have received other grants, that will form part of that 200,000 limit. But it's worth noting COVID grants are not included in this. So, if for whatever, you furloughed staff, whatever, that's not included in it. So please don't worry.
Sorry, just to add on to that point, not all businesses qualify for the 200,000 over the 3-year period. Check your type of business and what your business qualifies for, so please.
No, perfect. Thanks, Doreen. It is worth noting, yeah, if you do move some very specific things like agricultural goods, it may be a lower amount. So please do check. And I think those were all the questions that we had. So I don't know, Anna, if we want to open it up to any other participants.
Yeah, absolutely. If anybody has any other queries, that would be fantastic. You can put them into us now, or if anybody wants to speak, they can raise their hand.
Oh, that's okay. We'll take it as we've stunned everyone into silence. I do appreciate we've gone through quite a lot of content in an hour. So we'll leave it with you to digest. As I said, I'll make sure we share the slides out to Anna now. Please circulate as widely as you like. There is nothing secretive in them. As I said, we're here to kind of support as much as we can, and you'll have the recording. But if, as I said, anything you want to double check, either look on NICTA or reach out to us. We're more than happy to help support if you have slightly a more personal query that you'd like to chat to us offline about.
Thank you very much, Shanali. You've offered us so much detail today, so much information, but more importantly, you've given us the pointers as to where to find the absolute specifics that people will need, which are peculiar to their own situations. And I think that's probably the key pointer. So thank you so much. We will distribute, as you say, we'll distribute your slides and the recording. It'll go out to the wider membership as well. And thank you to you both, to Shanali for presenting, and Doreen for helping to answer questions and queries, and to Magda as well. Really appreciate you coming, and hopefully we'll see you again maybe in the new year, and maybe more information.
Definitely. As soon as we know, we'll reach out.
Perfect. Thank you so much today. Thank you everyone for attending as well.
Yeah, great. Thank you all. Have a lovely day.
Bye-bye.
Right.